Emma Dawson had been married to Luke for nearly 7 years. They lived just outside of Boston, both professionals in their early 30s. Emma, a school counselor with a tender heart and calm strength. Luke, a quiet architect who loved simplicity and silence more than most people could understand. To outsiders, they seemed like the perfect couple, stable, kind, well-matched. But behind closed doors, their connection had thinned over time, like thread-worn bare from too much tension. Kind of tension that wasn't loud or angry, but quiet, unsettling, and harder to explain. Emma missed how things used to feel. How Luke used to reach for her hand in the middle of the night. How they used to laugh over burnt pancakes on lazy Sundays. Now they barely touched. Conversations were brief. Affection had become routine. Their love, once warm and bright, had begun to feel like a faded photograph, still beautiful, but distant. So when Luke suggested a weekend getaway to a snowy cabin in Vermont, Emma said yes, though she wasn't sure if it would fix anything. Still, part of her hoped that the cold air and time away from their routines would warm something between them again. The cabin, old memories. New distance. The cabin was rustic, small, and filled with quiet charm. A stone fireplace sat in the center of the living room with soft flannel blankets draped over worn-out couches. Snow gently fell outside, painting the world in white silence. It was supposed to be romantic. Should have been. But the distance followed them there. Meals were eaten in silence. Small talk filled the spaces where confessions used to live. They went for walks, talked about the weather, about work, about everything except the one thing that mattered them. On the second night, after a dinner of pasta and wine, Emma pulled out an old deck of playing cards from a drawer. She remembered how they used to play during their early dating days, how Luke used to pretend he didn't care about winning when he absolutely did. "Let's play," she said with a small smile, her tone soft but unsure. Luke looked up from the fire, his blue eyes tired but gentle. "Yeah," he said. "Let's." They sat across from each other at the small wooden table. The fire crackled beside them, casting golden shadows across the room. The bet winner gets to ask for anything. They played for a while, like old times. The game wasn't the point, it was the excuse. Something about holding the cards, laughing at bad hands, and watching each other's reactions felt familiar. Safe. But then Luke said something that changed the tone entirely. "Let's make it interesting," he said, shuffling the cards in that quiet, careful way he always had. "Winner gets to ask the loser for anything." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Anything?" He nodded once, eyes unreadable. "Anything." Her heart skipped. It wasn't like Luke to suggest something like that. He was the safe one, the planner, the one who thought through every move. But there was a strange edge in his voice. Not playful, not quite serious either. Something in between. Part of her wanted to say no, but another part, deeper, more desperate, wanted to say yes. Because maybe, just maybe, this game wasn't just a game. So she agreed. The game more than cards. They played 3 rounds, then 5, then 7. The wine made them looser. The fire made them warmer. For the first time in months, they laughed without thinking. Emma noticed something, though Luke wasn't playing like he usually did. He was holding back, folding when he shouldn't, making small mistakes. At first, she thought she was just rusty. But after a while, it became clear he was letting her win. And not subtly, he wanted her to win. She didn't say anything, just kept playing until, finally, he laid down a hand that all but guaranteed her victory. And when she looked at him, confused and unsure, he just smiled. A sad, knowing smile. "You won," he said. Emma leaned back in her chair, her pulse racing. "Okay," she said slowly. "So what should I ask for?" Luke met her eyes, and for a second she saw something in them that made her chest ache. Vulnerability, fear, love. "I was hoping you'd win," he said softly. She blinked. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper creased and worn like it had been handled many times. "I wrote this before we came." "Here," he said. "I didn't know if I'd give it to you. Still don't know if it's a good idea. But that's what I want you to take. That's what I want to give you." He handed it to her. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Her hands trembled slightly as she took it. The fire cast golden light on the edges, but her fingers were cold. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Luke looked down, then back at her. "Everything I couldn't say out loud," he said. Then he kissed her forehead so softly, so gently, it made her want to cry and turned away. He walked outside, into the snow, leaving her alone in the cabin with the letter in her hands. The cliffhanger. A letter. A pause. A storm inside the moment he closed the door behind him. Silence settled in the room like a heavy fog dot. Emma didn't open the letter. Not yet. She sat there, the paper in her lap, her heart pounding against her ribs like it was trying to warn her, or prepare her. Or maybe, just maybe, it was trying to remind her of something she had forgotten, that love doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, and sometimes it hides. She stared at the folded letter, her fingers tracing the edges. The cabin, no longer, felt warm. The fire had dimmed. The snow outside had grown heavier. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the question now echoing in her mind: why would a man lose a game? It's just to give his wife a letter. She didn't know the answer. Yet, but something in her heart told her it was going to change everything. Some things you can't cook twice. Some moments only rise once. Madeline sat in her small, warmly lit kitchen on a quiet Thursday evening. The city lights of Seattle twinkled faintly through her window, but all she could see was Jake's face. His smile, the way it softened when he looked at her. The hesitance in his eyes when their hands brushed over the pizza dough. She had replayed that moment 100 times in her mind, like a favorite song on repeat. But the truth was, she was terrified. Not of him, not even really of what she felt, but of being vulnerable again. After years of holding her heart close. After the slow erosion of trust and hope. She wasn't sure she could open that door without getting hurt. Again, she had debated not going back to the class for the final session. But something inside her pulled her forward. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was the promise of closure. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the possibility of a new beginning. When she stepped into the kitchen studio that Tuesday night, the familiar hum of chopping knives, sizzling pans, and soft laughter filled the air. The class was buzzing with excitement for the date night themed session, where students paired up to cook dishes together. Madeline glanced around the room. Jake stood near the counter, organizing ingredients, but his eyes scanned the group, like he was waiting for something or someone. Her heart skipped. He wasn't paired with anyone yet. She felt a flutter of anticipation, quickly replaced by a wave of anxiety. What if she wasn't the person he wanted? What if this was just another moment she'd misread? The pairs began forming, couples exchanged smiles and shared excited whispers. Madeline felt invisible. Jake approached her briefly, handed her an apron, and said with a friendly smile, "Good to see you back." "Thanks," she replied softly. But when Jake turned to the group to announce pairings, her heart sank. He paired 2 other students together and walked away. Madeline swallowed hard and pulled her apron tighter around her waist. She was partnered with a man named Michael, a polite but quiet accountant who talked mostly about his cats. She tried to focus on chopping vegetables and measuring spices, but her mind was elsewhere. Across the room, Jake moved around the other pairs with ease, smiling, laughing, helping, but Madeline could see the subtle glances he cast in her direction. It was confusing, frustrating. If he cared, why didn't he pair with her? Was he avoiding her, or just unsure? The music shifted to something slower and softer. The aroma of garlic and basil filled the air as everyone worked, but Madeline felt trapped in her own head. She kept stealing looks at Jake. He caught her gaze once and gave a small, almost apologetic smile. There was something vulnerable in it that made her heart ache. By the time they moved on to plating the food, she excused herself, murmuring a headache. Michael nodded understandingly, but didn't ask any questions. Madeline stepped outside the studio into the cool Seattle night. Grateful for the fresh air. She pulled her coat tighter and took a deep breath. The night air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of rain and cedar trees. It settled her, but her heart was still racing. She debated going home. Then she heard a voice, calling her name, Madeline. Wait. She turned. Jake stood near the door, hands in the pockets of his jacket, looking less like the confident instructor and more like a man wrestling with something inside. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then he spoke. I'm sorry. His voice was rough, not from anger, but from something deeper: regret, fear, hope. I've been teaching this class for 5 years, he said slowly, and I've seen people come and go, students who are just passing through. But you're different. Madeline blinked, not sure if she wanted to believe him. I've never felt this way before. Not with anyone. And not when I wasn't supposed to. Her heart pounded in her chest. She swallowed the lump in her throat. Not supposed to. Jake nodded. I'm scared, Madeline. Scared of what this means. Scared of opening up again. She stepped closer, her voice soft. Me too. They stood in the quiet street, the noise of the city fading into the background. The moments stretched, filled with unsaid words and emotions neither of them could fully explain. Jake took a breath and reached out his hand tentatively. Would you like to talk? Maybe over coffee or dinner? Madeline hesitated. For a long moment she considered the safety of saying no. But then she smiled. Yes. Over the next few weeks, the line between student and teacher blurred into something much more complex and tender. They met after class for coffee, then dinner, then long walks in the park. They talked about everything. Hopes, fears, past heartbreaks, dreams that had faded with age but still flickered beneath the surface. Madeline found herself laughing again. The weight of loneliness lifting, replaced by a quiet joy she hadn't felt in years. Jake listened, like her stories mattered because they did. Yet, beneath the warmth, shadows remained. Both had been hurt, both carried scars, and both wondered if this was a beginning or just a beautiful, fragile moment doomed to fade. One evening, as they cooked together in Jake's cozy apartment, Madeline paused, her hands trembling slightly. Do you think people can really change? She asked. Jake looked at her, his eyes reflecting the soft glow of the kitchen light. I think people can learn to trust again, he said gently. It's scary, but maybe that's what makes it worth it. She nodded. It feels like we're stirring something delicate. Too fast, it could break. Jake smiled, brushing a stray hair behind her ear. Then we take it slow. We don't rush. We don't burn the dish. Madeline's breath caught. It was more than cooking advice. It was a promise as autumn deepened. Their connection grew. They cooked meals that tasted of new beginnings. Shared quiet moments filled with lingering touches and shy smiles. Yet neither rushed, neither pushed. They allowed the heat to build naturally, simmering with hope and respect. But life wasn't perfect. One night, Madeline received a call from Rachel. Her daughter sounded lonely, struggling with a new city and job. Madeline felt torn between her growing feelings for Jake and the motherly instinct pulling her across the continent. She confessed her fears to Jake. I don't want to lose myself again. I don't want to get close only to have everything change. Jake took her hands, steady and sure. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. No promises, no pressure, just ... now. The story doesn't end with fireworks or dramatic declarations. Instead, it closes gently, with two people standing on the edge of something real and perfect, uncertain but full of possibility. Jake leaned. In one evening, Close enough that Madeline could feel the warmth of his breath. Not a kiss, not yet, but close. A promise that maybe, some recipes are worth waiting for. The end.